This is K0PE, Chris Charron from Maxwell, Iowa. Today I'm going to talk about two things, the Freedom Rock Tour and RAGBRAI 42. But before we talk about RAGBRAI 42, we need to talk about RAGBRAI 16. RAGBRAI 16 occurred in 1988. At that time I was working for the Des Moines Register, and of course, working for the Register, you had to know about RAGBRAI. I wasn't a cyclist, but I was an active ham radio operator. After several conversations with the folks in the RAGBRAI office, I was finally able to convince them to let me drive a communications van and nightly set up a message center in the campgrounds. This was a big benefit to the riders because back then, remember, there wasn't a lot of cell phones, and RAGBRAI used to have to bring in banks and banks of telephones, and people would queue up, often waiting hours just to call home, just to let people know that they were okay. This turned out to be a great service for the riders, and they were very appreciative. Also during this time, I operated a special event station. While taking messages and also operating the special event station, ham radio operators on the ride started to come up and introduce themselves. This was really the first time that I or RAGBRAI really knew that there was a ham radio presence on RAGBRAI. It was during this time that I met NF0N Mike Nicholas from South Sioux City, Nebraska, who would become a lifelong friend and be an important part of ham radio's use in the next 25 RAGBRAIs. An interesting thing occurred as I was leaving town heading for the start of RAGBRAI 16. I was on a local repeater talking with Larry Vandewater, N0BKB, and I was telling him what I was about to do. Larry said, "Hey, you should keep a journal or a diary just to kind of remember what occurs." This is where, if this had been a movie, you would have heard music go, dun dun dun, because this turned out to be really important to the future of ham radio on RAGBRAI. So doing as Larry suggested, I kept a daily diary. At the end of the ride, I read through my notes and I said to myself, I could probably clean this up and this could make an interesting story. So I cleaned it up, shipped it off to QST, or the ARRL, and lo and behold, I couldn't believe it when I received a letter saying that they wanted to run it as a feature story. Almost a year later, in the July 1989 QST, Riding the RAGBRAI appeared. After the story ran, I heard from a lot of hams from all around the country that were interested in doing RAGBRAI. One of the things I had noticed the previous year was that RAGBRAI riders came in every shape, size, and form. And I started thinking maybe this is something I could do. So I reached out to a lot of the hams who had communicated with me after my article, and this was the beginning of the first organized RAGBRAI team on the ride. RAGBRAI 17 in 1989 saw the first organized ham radio team on RAGBRAI. We rode as Team SpokeCom, and at one time grew to have 45 hams and 3 support vehicles. We even picked up corporate sponsorship from ICOM and Ham Radio Outlet. Steve Roberts, N4RVE, even came out and used RAGBRAI for the maiden voyage of his million-dollar bike, Behemoth. Our ham radio operators were primarily used to help dispatch ambulances. Because everyone had different riding speeds, you could almost be assured that people would disperse across the entire route. That way, we always had somebody in close proximity to an accident. This greatly reduced ambulance response time. By RAGBRAI 25 in 1997, technology had vastly improved and there was a lot more cell phones on the daily routes, so the need for ham radio started to diminish, and our team started to become more of a social group. Prior to the start of RAGBRAI 25, the Register offered me an opportunity to do an online column, something we were calling a travelogue, about the ride. And I spent the next 6 years doing virtual RAGBRAI. At the time we didn't know it, but I guess what we were doing was called blogging. After my departure in 1997, the team became known as Team Megacycles, and has continued under that name for the last 17 years. Even though I haven't rode with them those 17 years, I've always carried a radio during the rides, and I've always managed conversations with them, great QSOs, and yes, shared a few cold beverages. An interesting aside to tell you about, apparently it's frowned upon to talk like a pirate when you sign W0R, and I was banned from using that call late in the ride this year. This brings us to RAGBRAI 42. But before we can talk about RAGBRAI 42, we need to talk about the Freedom Rock Tour. But before we can talk about the Freedom Rock Tour, we need to talk about the Freedom Rock. The Freedom Rock is the inspiration of artist Ray Bubba Sorensen, who in 1999 painted a large boulder near Greenfield, Iowa, as a way to thank veterans. And since that time, every year on Memorial Day, he has painted the rock. Each year, the story told by the rock is different, but the one thing that remains the same is a helicopter on the side of the boulder where paint has been mixed with the ashes of deceased veterans. In 2013, Ray Bubba Sorensen started the Freedom Rock Tour. The Freedom Rock Tour is a way to locally honor veterans within the 99 counties of Iowa and also promote tourism. And this is where I get involved. My town, Maxwell, Iowa, has been given the honor of being the custodian for the Story County Freedom Rock. I was inspired by Ray Sorensen's example and wanted to honor the veterans and also raise awareness for the Freedom Rock and the Freedom Rock Tour. So I decided to take an American flag that I have had for several years. This flag has been to Ground Zero, the Flight 93 crash site, and the Pentagon. And I decided I was going to fly that flag on RAGBRAI. I received permission from Ray Bubba Sorensen to represent the Freedom Rock, as well as from the committee representing the Story County Freedom Rock. Working with Story County veterans groups, I was able to get a list of 428 veterans that I would honor with each mile of my RAGBRAI ride. Okay, let's see. We've talked about RAGBRAI XLII, the Freedom Rock, and the Freedom Rock Tour. So now I guess we can go ahead and talk about RAGBRAI 42. RAGBRAI 42 is the 25th anniversary of our very first RAGBRAI team, and the members of Megacycles reached out to the founders and asked if we would be interested in riding again. I jumped at the chance, and believe it or not, these guys have become these guys. Not naming any names, but man, some of these guys sure didn't age very well. The starting point for RAGBRAI 42 was Rock Valley in northwest Iowa, and this is where we all met up on Saturday. Bikes were assembled, friendships were rekindled, and stories were told. Everybody was excited for the ride to start on the next day. Day one of RAGBRAI was Rock Valley to Okoboji with stops in Hall, Boyden, Sheldon, Melvin, May, and Milford. I dipped my rear wheel to start my ride and headed for the Mississippi. I did notice the flags were flying pretty straight, and this would prove to be a big deal later in the day. By the time I arrived in Okoboji, I had rode 85 miles. I was running on fumes. The wind that day had pushed me and my trailer around. It was mostly a crossing wind with an occasional headwind. That evening in camp, I wasn't hungry and wasn't thirsty. I collapsed in my tent and slept till the next morning. Day two of RAGBRAI was Okoboji to Emmitsburg, with stops in Terrell and Grattinger. This should have been an easy day, 40 miles, but again, the wind was my enemy. And about 30 miles into the ride, I stopped sweating, and things seemed to get a little hazy at this point. At the 30-mile mark, I linked up with our chase vehicle, and the driver said I was acting fairly incoherent and confused. And at that point, he pulled me from the ride. Our host home that evening was 10 miles out of town, and it was on a busy road, so I believe the right decision was made at that point to pull me off the ride. I don't remember a lot about our Emmitsburg stay, but I do remember being extremely depressed that I had failed in my quest to carry my flag across Iowa and honor the 428 veterans on my list. This is when Team Megacycles made me proud. They rallied around the flag and my cause. It was decided that each member of the team would carry the flag for a portion so that the quest could continue and the veterans could be honored. Day 3 of RAGBRAI was Emmitsburg to Forest City, 80 miles, with stops in Ringsted, Bancroft, Titonka, and Crystal Lake. Because the flag had come off the course 10 miles early, it was decided that whoever carried the flag on this day had to do the 20-mile bonus loop in order to get those miles back. KC9QPJ Raymond Knapp III from Rockton, Illinois, volunteered for the job, and by the time he arrived in camp, had done 112 miles. I drove our support vehicle this day and spent most of the day napping and taking on fluids as I had become dehydrated the day before. Day 4. Forest City to Mason City with stops in Ventura and Clear Lake. If I had to pick the most perfect day on any of the 25 years worth of RAGBRAIs I've done, this would be the perfect day. Slightly downhill, tailwind, and temperatures in the 70s. The flag today was carried by 17-year-old Brett Bowie from Columbia, Maryland. Each morning we would read the list of veterans assigned to that day's ride. Today, while we were reading the list, our host came out and asked us what we were doing. I explained, and he asked to look at the list. He started to read the list and then started to cry. He then said, "Wait a minute," and went into his house. He came out with an Army shirt and asked me to carry it to the Mississippi. Our host had been a Vietnam veteran and said that his brothers hadn't been treated very well when they returned. He thanked us for what we were doing. I had tears streaming down my face as I left his house, and I cried again as I dipped my wheel in the Mississippi with Keith's shirt attached to my trailer. I caught up with Ray and Brett at the Clear Lake Fire Station. Here they have an official artifact from 9/11, part of a floor joist from the North Tower. During a previous RAGBRAI, several members from Team Escape New York firefighters, had stayed at the Clear Lake Fire Station. 5 of those members lost their lives on 9/11. Pictured here are Brett Bowie and KC9QPJ Raymond Knapp from Illinois, holding the tri-folded flag that the team had been carrying across Iowa. The psychological halfway point of any RAGBRAI is Interstate 35. I pulled over and for 20 minutes had the cars honking at me, acting like a fool, and the flag waving in the breeze. I'd probably still be there, but N0KRQ Clive Hornback from Bevington, Iowa pulled up and told me I should probably head on down the course. A truly amazing Wednesday. Day 5, Mason City to Waverly, with stops in Norris Springs, Rockford, Marble Rock, Greene, Packard, and Clarksville. Today the flag was carried by NF0N Mike Nicholas from South Sioux City, Nebraska. It was a good day, but the temperature did get a little toasty by the end of the day. And as you can see by the wind blowing my flag, we did have a side wind again. One of my goals was to try to find a way to honor the 15 members of the military marked as killed in action on my list. I had struggled for days and really hadn't found an appropriate way. When along rides up Steve Smart. Steve Smart was carrying a bugle on his back and, believe it or not, was celebrating the 200th anniversary of the Star-Spangled Banner. What happened next is a once-in-a-lifetime event, a serendipitous moment only seen on RAGBRAI. It still gives me goosebumps. I ran into Steve Smart with 2 T's, and we were trying to find a way to honor the 15 killed in action on my list, and I think we found a really cool way to do it. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Steve Smart. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. This is my 23rd RAGBRAI. I usually bring my trumpet and find a band or two to jam with, but this year is a special year. It's the 200th anniversary of the Star Spangled Banner. So we're trying to help bring and promote awareness of that and bring awareness to the people about it. I'm playing the Star Spangled Banner at least 100 times this year. This will be number 73 right here today with Chris.
Okay, and then Steve has an honor guard today holding the bike for me. Introduce yourselves.
I'm Sonia Stout. I'm from Maxwell. This is my 22nd RAGBRAI, and I know Chris because I'm a fellow Maxwellite.
Is that what we are?
Oh,
I always wondered what we were.
I don't know, Maxwellios,
Maxwellians?
Maxwellites.
All right.
My name is Jody Jeskowitz, and I'm from Ankeny, Iowa.
My name is Tammy McLean, and I'm from Alleman, and this is my first day of RAGBRAI.
Awesome. Okay, let's see how this goes.
You want me to hold it up?
Oh, that'd be cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, this year is the 200th anniversary. The 200th anniversary of the Star Spangled Banner. Will you please join me in honoring the flag and singing the Star Spangled Banner?
USA! 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 That's beautiful, man.
Thank you, brother.
Day 6. Waverly to Independence, with stops in Bremer, Tripoli, Sumner, Westgate, Olwine, and Otterville. Today the flag was carried by KC0ODK, Lawrence Robinson from Cedar Rapids. Lawrence is the Inspector Gadget of the group. His bike can do everything except make espresso for you. The rain had started around 3 a.m. and a very close lightning strike woke us all up at 4. It rained all day. The temperature had also dropped to the high 50s. About 20 miles into the ride, a mayday call went out from young Brett. He was in a gymnasium full of pre-hypothermic people and needed to be rescued. A rescue mission was launched, and young Brett was saved. After a long, hard day, it's great to be welcomed by wonderful hosts and have a chance to relax. Day 7, the final day of the ride. Independence to Guttenberg, with stops in Winthrop, Lamont, Strawberry Point, Edgewood, and Garber. 1/5 of the total climb for this year's RAGBRAI occurred in the last 10 miles of the ride. Today, the flag-carrying duties were shared by KB4SBY Bryce Anton Jensen from Hiawatha and Team Captain NQ0V Gary Bishop from Marion. I was able to ride with Brett, Raymond, Lawrence, and Gary to the Mississippi River. Normally we would all spread out because of our different riding abilities, but had decided to ride in together, and it was awesome, including the last 2 really big hills. Here we are dipping our wheels after 428 miles in 7 days. and no worse for the wear. Okay, maybe a little worse for the wear. But what a truly great ride and an awesome end to our great adventure. It was time to load up and head home. This photo is Walter Keselowski, or Kaz. Kaz is very similar to the character in Rocky, Mickey Goldmill, Rocky's trainer, Burgess Meredith. So if you want to think about him, just think of that. Rocky, you're going to get in there and you're going to fight. That's Kaz. Kaz, thanks for everything. You were the glue that held our team together. One final poignant moment occurred as we were loading. A driver from another team came over when she saw our flag and wanted to know what we had been doing. We explained, and she cried. It turns out she was a disabled veteran and before leaving active service had been part of the honor detail at Arlington Cemetery. 1 week after I returned from RAGBRAI, the Story County Freedom Rock was dedicated by Ray Bubba Sorensen. I gave him one of the signs from the side of my trailer. He said it would be an honor to add it to other memorabilia that he has collected during the Freedom Rock tour.